If there is one thing people know about me, it's that I sound a wee bit drunk whenever I talk. That is good. That means it is all working as intended. If there is one thing people tend to know about me in the 40k sphere, it's that I absolutely positively hate 10th edition 40k. So since by my calculations, this video should be out likely maybe a week or two before the announcement of 11th edition, which we're assuming is going to be at Adepticon. If not, wow, this is going to be rough. I'm just going to take this time to make some declarations, describe to you all the unenlightened masses what I think should be implemented to make a good 11th edition and what I would want to see added in order for me to enjoy the game again. A lot of creators are doing that right now, and I can't let Valrak beat me, right? I love wargaming. I like complaining a little bit, so let's get into that little peanut butter and jelly sandwich of the two. Let's start with something simple. Let's do a 10-point list as to why I don't like 10th edition so that you guys can kind of understand it from that, slop form. The top 10 list, do we do those still? Is that a thing? God, I'm getting old. Whatever. Make sure to drink your gamer sups, hold your Calgar tightly to your ample bosom, pray to whatever armed emperor you love most, and let's boogie with number 10, Psychers are actually pretty terrible at the moment. They have been pretty much the entire edition, and it makes me very sad. They lack flavor because if you also haven't played the game, psychic is just a keyword that is ascribed to certain guns that statistically do the same thing as regular guns, except they have the downside of having psychic on them. And it's literally only a downside because the only time psychic ever comes up is if someone else has a keyword that is anti-psychic, which is lame, and I hate it. Number 9, all the armies feel very, very samey. Like too samey. Now, I will say there is a lot of unique things in the game right now, but in short, all the armies have basically the same toolkit, because if they didn't, then it wouldn't be fair and balanced, which I think is bullshit, but we'll get into that. All the stratagems are basically the same gotchas of mortal wounds, lethal hits, and armor of contempt. The list grinds on. Number 8, rerolls. Too goddamn many. Most factions have inbuilt rules to hit on 3s or better and reroll misses, and some factions go even further with rerolling hit rolls, wound rolls, and even sometimes reroll a damage or two. Just let the dice game be a dice game, or just say you hit. It just seems too much. Number 7, power creep. Nothing crazy to explain here. Back in 7th edition, a bolter hit once at long range, which was 24 inches, and twice at short range, which was 12. Now an intercessor with the bolt rifle under the perfect conditions that didn't move hits 5 times, re-rolling hit rolls, and also hits at 30 inches of range. Wow, that's actually pretty insane, and that's not even that good from what I've been hearing. Number 6, the Tau still suck. They just do. They still suck. They've always sucked. They're always going to suck, no matter how many cool models you release with them. Number 5, mortal wounds are out of control. I mean this. I think they genuinely are so beyond the pale of what they are intended to be and what they should do, to the point where most people try and table you, if they have a very good strategy for it, by maximizing the amount of mortal wounds possible. We'll discuss this a little bit more when I discuss what I want from 11th edition, but we will get there because now we're going into, drumroll please, number 4. Most of the armies lack flavor. They all kind of functionally do the same thing. There is no pizzazz or risky mechanics that play into the weirder armies enough. Or, oh, what's that? If I get this bonus on my model, it gets hazardous? Damn, that's crazy. I take some damage on a roll of 1 after all is said and done. In prior editions, if I missed and rolled a 1 on the hit roll for my plasma pistol shot, the model died. That was on Space Marines too. It's kind of a fun thing that Tau, 1,000 curses upon their name, had, stable plasma that was slightly weaker, but I guess that's not even really that important now. 3, the fact that massive sweeping changes can be made to the entire game between editions has made people frustrated, where we had to actually riot in order to keep the Death Watch as their own army and not be absorbed into something else. And even then, it was only just barely. I know they're probably not going to be a thing in 11th, but we shall see. I am still mad that the sweeping changes to core mechanics to nerf several different armies enemies all ended up hitting the Kroot, and now I can't play the Kroot anymore. No, the Kroot are not the Tau. I do not play the Tau. I play the Kroot. There is a difference. Number 2! With a lack of incentive in war gear costs, it's made so many options just are objectively better and have no reason to be excluded for running sometimes. Like, yes, every Rhino can in fact be equipped with a hunter-killer missile or not. What happens if you don't run it? Nothing. You just don't have a hunter-killer missile. Sweet Jesus. And number 1, my biggest complaint. The higher you get to your level of playability, you realize that the majority of the game becomes nothing more than just trying to deny your opponent as much agency as humanly possible so that you can do whatever bullshit strategy you have, as opposed to whatever they have going for them. That's fun, right? That's what we all want, you know? Not being able to play the game. Yeah, so having an entire strategy based around making sure that your opponent can't play the game, that sounds fun. Whatever. Deep breaths, everyone. Deep breaths. I know I'm still mad about 10th edition, as are most of you. So let's take a moment to de-stress and talk about friend of the channel, Tabletop Stronghold. Been getting back into painting Space Marines recently due to an escalation league in the Horus Heresy that's kind of started in the local area, and it's led me down a dark path. Painting MDF terrain. Now, calm down. I know it's probably a bit intimidating. It was to me, but one thing I've found actually makes it easy is, weirdly enough, those speed paint markers. Yeah, prime it white and let it rip. That's just usually how it works. So when I realized I had this cheat code to speed paint MDF terrain, I had to hit up a friend of the channel, Tabletop Stronghold, for their terrain set. With enough terrain in a box to basically set up an entire table for war games, be it 40k, Horus Heresy, or what have you, Tabletop Stronghold has a wide range of cases alongside that. But people often don't talk about the convenience of the terrain they offer as well, which is why I think it's time for me to kind of bring it up. Basically standardized to the current rule set of 40k and is genuinely very useful and easy, and also doesn't take up much space. There is a whole mess of sales going on right now on the site, ranging all the way up to 35% off, so by clicking my link in the description or the comments, you'll be able to pick yourself up this terrain set for your own home game so that you don't need to go find an LGS, or if you don't even have an LGS in your area, this is super convenient for you to host your own games. And also, while you're there, you could also pick yourself up a case for display or transport, as I have multiple cases at this point that I use for both. If something isn't on sale, or when you see this, the sale is over, do not worry, my friends. Simply use code BONES25 at checkout for 25% off, and know you'll be supporting a friend of the channel. Thanks once again to Tabletop Stronghold for supporting this channel, and let's get back to it. Okay, so jokes aside, let's talk about 11th edition, as we gotta do the corporate sandwich right now. Something positive, something negative, and end on something positive. So what I can say right now, gearing up to the release, or at least the announcement of 11th edition, is we're in a genuinely hopeful spot. They have a lot of good models that are checking a lot of boxes that I think are cool. And the closer we get to the idea of a new Weird Boy coming out, the better. I think that the new edition is gonna be off to a good start for release's sake. Iron Warriors are getting a decent amount of representation, and Peter is probably going to be showing up too. Orcs, if the leaks are correct, are going to be the central antagonist of the next edition, which is awesome, because I find Orcs versus Space Marines tends to lead to the greatest stories, as Orcs and Space Marines go together like my face and Lotara Saren's ass. They are even releasing a new Votan model that occupies a niche that we didn't really have filled before, a character for the Chthonian Berserks model, which I will state still probably has the shittiest hair I have ever seen on any miniature in any game ever. Like, it's just a ball. He just has a hairball on his head. I don't like that. I'll probably just shave him bald or put a mohawk on him from one of my slayers. So they are gearing up to focus on what seems like a lot of the fundamentals of each faction. So with that, I am appeased as far as releases go, because, well, I play Crimson Fists. Yeah, I sold off almost all of my Space Marines to a friend of mine. so I could get a single army and less clutter in my house, and I do quite love the blue fellers. So, me getting Space Marines, my roommate who's been playing Orcs since the release of the game, even if the new War Boss model has a bit of a weird wonky arm if you do the normal big choppa, but whatever. In terms of aesthetic, I can say that this 11th edition release and announcement is kind of checking off all the boxes that I wanted to. So with that being said, let's get into a pinch of negativity and see how far we can spiral down this rabbit hole. I want to cover mechanics, I want to cover the changes that I want to see, and I want to see the quality of life things that I think are kind of important. So before we do that, I want to once again acknowledge my biases. Just, for the sake of clarity going forward, I'm just going to come out with it. I detest 10th edition, but here's the secret. There has never been an edition I have tried more to like, or a wargame in general, that I have put in effort to try and like more than 10th edition. I've tried numerous armies, I have tried new strategies, homebrew rules, house rules. I've tried to mix in rules from other games, and every time I play a game that, through all this tinkering, is still 90% 10th edition, I don't have fun. The only time I did was with Kroot because they were just a bunch of weirdos and the army was super weird. And no, I did not run Tau. I ran Kroot. Don't lump me in with those weirdos. Like, they were a non-stealthy ambush army that had hit and run stuff while having no vehicles and also no real major anti-vehicle unless you count just overwhelming numbers and a guy with an exploding stick. That's the Lone Hunter, by the way, and I love the Lone Hunter and his weird salamander. It was just fun to win by the skin of your teeth because, like, I had nothing to deal with anything that had a 2-up save. But then GW wanted to nerf stealth armies, so then the 18-inch no sight strats ended up getting nerfed, the unit revival strats ended up getting nerfed, and then command point decreaser command abilities ended up getting nerfed into the ground. This is what we call in the game absolute horseshit, because the Kroot ended up just having to rely on the same toolkit as everyone else. Now, lethal hits, mortals, and overwhelming numbers, which sucked the fun out of the game because there was nothing unique about them anymore. So when I talk about mechanics for 11th edition and what I want to see, no, I come from that bias as well as the bias of a filthy casual player. No, I'm not a narrative 40k player. I mean a casual player, like just to pick up and play with the boys, know the rules, just memeing while making funny moments of what happened. Just an entire afternoon of just chilling. I don't care about quick games. I just want to have some fun. So when I play 10th edition, it's just so annoying to not have that kind of flavor, which I guess is as good of a starting point as any. When I talk to friends about 40k who have problems with 10th, the main complaint I get is a lack of flavor. Now, what do I even fucking mean about flavor? Flavor is an unsubstantial term. The best way that I can describe it is you can take a bite out of a cheeseburger and a bite out of a steak, and even though they are beef products, you can tell just by taste, even if you're blindfolded, that they are different. That's what flavor is. I can describe to you a gun from prior editions, and you would know exactly what I meant most of the time. So let's go 9th edition, 24-inch range, strength 3, rapid fire, 1 damage. Yeah, most of you just immediately went lasgun. Pretty cool, right? Okay, let's go further than that. Range 12 inches, strength 8, minus 4 AP, d6 damage, extra damage when you're within half range. Yeah, again, most of you thought melt-a-gun, and a few of you thought fusion gun from the Eldar. Why are you here? I shit on the Eldar so much. Okay, how about this? Melee weapon that is strength times 3, minus 3 AP, 3 damage a swing. Now, I probably lost most of you because a lot of you just thought, what the fuck weapon has times 3 strength? Exactly. It's one dude. It's Big McLarge Huge himself, Tor Garadon, had a times 3 melee weapon. Even the Primarch weapon known as the Hand of Dominion did not have that high of a strength multiplier. And I think that that's really interesting, that the core level of stats in the game made it so that just by comparison, there was a little bit more flavor as to the means in which you got to strength 12. I mean, in modern editions, it's just strength 12, but yeah, sure, it's fundamentally the same thing, but comparatively narratively, it just doesn't have that same level of zhuzh to get there, right? It was the flavor of it being so different from everyone else that made it special. The weapon itself, sure, it might have been just a cosmetic difference, just gave so many different interesting reasons as to why it was so strong. Because there's no other power fist in the game that had ×3 to my knowledge. And this weapon was so powerful that it gave the user, Torgaradon, a -1 to hit, by the way, which I get it, that's awesome. And also, I guess that means it's not as viable in melee, but that's also a problem. Everything has to be a viable option out the gate. Everything can't be immediately finicky and you have to get into a very specific position to use it, because then people wouldn't know what to do with it if they just bought a random kit. Heavy weapons no longer have a negative to shooting when you move and shoot. They have a positive to standing still and shooting, and you shoot normally whenever you move. You were trading mobility for firepower in the past, with 7th edition and prior you having to do snapshots, which means you only hit on 6s. 8th and 9th edition you got -1s, and then 10th edition you get a +1 if you stood still. I can't wait till next edition where you auto hit if you stand still and you get +1 to hit if you just move, which is, it just seems crazy that they're scaling it up like that. Which, I guess to some degree you could say that there is a bit of a trade-off between mobility and firepower, but the trade-off is you're hitting normally when you move and you're hitting better when you stand still, as opposed to you're barely hitting when you move and you're hitting normally when you stand still. I think that that's just bad. I think adding more drawbacks and adding more weight behind the decisions you make is the key to making the next edition more interesting, because in 10th edition, as I've said before, the biggest thing that I hate about it is that it takes away the agency of your opponent. You have to deny them as many options as possible when all the options are super easily done or cancelable. It's like playing a game of Magic the Gathering or playing a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! God. Yeah. Where you have to dedicate your entire stratagem, in specifically Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess, to just completely preventing your opponent from winning on their turn, as opposed to you setting up on your turn what your win condition is. It's kind of a rock, paper, scissors thing, and I don't like that. In 9th edition, let me describe a few things to you about the loss of flavor, and you kind of get where I'm coming from. So you know that I'm not just being blindly faithful and blindly shitting on 10th edition. So these are all going to be melee weapon profiles from 9th edition from the same faction. So number 1, +3 strength, -2 AP, 2 damage. You probably have the mental image in your head of what this is. Okay, next we have +1 strength, -3 AP, 1 damage. Okay, it's pretty understandable. You guys probably have another image in your head. Lastly, strength user, -3 AP, damage 1, but you get an extra attack and melee with it. So these are all pretty cool. They all have a different niche. They all are radically different weapons with cool different niches, and each one can be equipped to the same sergeant model or champion equivalent to this unit. And before you ask, yes, they are all modeled radically different. One is a power fist kind of thing, one is a power axe kind of thing, and one is a power sword. Makes sense? Yeah, you probably thought about that too. Okay, cool. In 10th edition, they are all the same weapon and have the same melee stats regardless of how they're modeled. Literally just being called kin melee weapons. Yes, I'm complaining about unfair treatment with the Leagues of Votann. They just homogeneously, I don't know if that's a word, blob every one of those stat lines together into somehow making a shittier one that makes them not really usable in melee at all. It makes me so mad because I just want something. I want to enjoy whatever my models are, but they just take it away. Oh, it's like, oh, you like power fists? That just says so much about you as an army. Like, you putting a power fist on your kin shows, oh, you like the heavy hitters. It might not be as reliable as the other weapons, but it's really, really useful in small scenarios. That's really cool. It also makes no fucking sense because other models in the army get a concussion gauntlet stat line. Like, you have the Call, you have the twin-linked concussion gauntlets that the Chthonian Berserks have, you have the Hearth Guard, which can get concussion gauntlets. So why can't the Hearth kin? I could understand lumping the plasma axe and the plasma sword together, but it just mechanically frustrates me. By and far, this is only one of the complaints I have in a sea of shit. For 11th edition, I need them to add more choice for me to enjoy it again. Don't just make it like a master-crafted power weapon and then have it be a blank slate to cover all of the options. I'd like to have the choice and just let people model it however they want. Hell, give me the ability to at least model it as the plastic kit would allow me to, man. It's not that hard. Like, sure, there's some people out there who are going to be like, yeah, I want to put a power lance on this when there hasn't been a power lance model in years to my knowledge outside of like the Horus Heresy. There's also someone who will go out there and say, well, yeah, just put the power lance on your model and just go, hey, I want to run it as a power sword. What's the problem with that? But at that point, just fucking go play Catan, you plebeian. This is a war game. Choices matter, you fuck. It doesn't have to be extreme. Just keep it to GW Plastic, like I said. And spend time on keeping track of these stats. Bring the playtesters back. I think it's not a big ask as long as they are adding on to 10th edition and not starting from the ground up like with 8th edition and with 10th edition again. Next up is one that I think is going to be a bit more of my contentious one, and that is Psychers. I'll also loop in Mortal Wounds because they kind of go hand in hand, especially with the prior editions, but I think that Psychers are one of the coolest parts of 40k. Having a Psyker in your army means that you have an entire arsenal of tools that you get to interact with. There's some armies that in prior editions never interacted with the psychic phase, which meant that they had to plan around other players bringing Psychers, which I thought was really interesting. But the thing that I have to say about 10th edition is Psychers are probably the thing they need to change most. If they're not going to give more agency and more ability to go back and forth and less lethality, then they need to at least make Psychers not terrible. I'm going to get some flack for saying this, but I think step one for this is not actually bringing back the psychic phase, because the psychic phase back in the day did make it feel a little unfair for people who had to spend 30 minutes just doing smites over and over and over again with like the Thousand Suns and the Grey Knights. I think they should do it kind of like how they do similarly to other GW games, like Warhammer The Old World. Old World has a system where ranged spells are cast in the shooting phase, close-up melee spells are cast in the melee phase, buffs and curses are done in the command phase, so on and so forth. I believe they are doing that for the Horus Heresy. I have not played as much Horus Heresy as I want, and Psychers are very less common in that. Psychers right now offer no difference to the game that a Space Marine captain would do so, but also the one unique mechanic they do have is Psychic as a keyword, but if you have Psychic as a keyword, it's actually a detriment to them. If you are running something that has a Psychic keyword and you go up against something that, say, is a blank, like a Calixtus Assassin or Sisters of Silence or so on, then you get a negative to dealing with them, and that's the only thing. Psychic doesn't really offer anything else. And I know that back in 9th edition, there was an issue with Mortal Wound spam, and this is kind of where I have to admit another bias that I still have a grudge against the Grey Knights for blasting me with over 30 mortal wounds in one turn. That shit is not fun because it removes your ability to respond to anything because you don't get a armor save, invuln save. You could get a feel no pain, but if you're running Space Marines, good luck. So how do we fix this? Easy, we get rid of mortal wounds.
You have 5 seconds to rephrase that.
Okay, so I know that sounds a bit radical. In a lot of ways, it kind of is. But I find ever since the beginning of their introduction, I've kind of never really enjoyed them. The reason being is simple. There is nothing you can do against them. Sure, there's, I guess, a few things you can do, and I guess that's a bit hyperbolic of me to say. If you feel no pains or regen saves or whatever they decide to change it in any other game. But damage you cannot mitigate outside of those few rules is basically what it is, and is just dead guys. Kind of goes against how I feel the game wants to run, and at least how it's run in the past. I will state that there is a caveat. When I say it goes against it, I mean at the level of ease they can be accessed. The idea of instant death rules has existed in 40k since its inception, but they were something special, a weapon of such unanimous power that they were seen as an exception to the rule. There is instant death, there is, if your strength is like triple the toughness of the model that you're aiming it at, then if they take a wound from it unsaved, they die instantly. Stuff like that has existed, but that has always been an exception, something special. Now, they are a bit more reined in 10th to my knowledge than that of 9th, but things like devastating wounds are essentially the same thing with a different coat of paint. Sure, there are mechanical differences, but they initially weren't. It literally was just on a critical wound, confer the damage characteristic to mortal wounds, and that was so powerful that they had to change it due to the spam of it. So it removes that level of response you have to them. I've been playing a lot of war games, too many really, but I love how they handle levels, so it kind of gives me that different perspective. It makes me realize just how fun it is to have that kind of response to things, and not just, whoops, you had a single millimeter of a miniature sticking out of a corner that I can see now with one of my guys. Time for me to roll all of their shots and kill an entire 10-man squad from wounds they can't resist, because whatever, everything is guardsman when nothing is guardsman. What I want from 11th edition is to remove mortals or damage that can't be resisted, or at least make it so that they're rare, that it is a special thing, and in their place supplement them with something like in Old World or Horus Heresy, where it's an attack with a better profile. Like, instead of D3 mortal wounds like some of the old smites, try something like a single strength 8 AP 3 hit, which is scary, but yeah, you can actually deal with it. Sure, it would slow down the games a little bit because you have to kind of finagle that a bit more, but the only people that I noticed who care about faster games is competitive players, because they want to get more game in. See, on the casual end of the spectrum, and I think to some degree on the narrative end of the spectrum, people don't care how many games they get in. They just want to be playing the game. So, I don't know, if you're playing the game with someone that you don't like and it's going on for too long, then, well, concede. Who cares? It's a game. I want them to focus not so much less on the competitive side of things, because the competitive players seem to be a little bit bored with the stagnancy of it. They seem to be at least satisfied with the tweaking. I want them to add some of that same attention to the filthy casuals like me. I love the hobby. I love painting miniatures and giving them little character pieces that make them unique. But in 10th edition, they all just feel like pieces on a board that could be slotted out for any other piece that shares the same title. I want the return of player response, and I don't care about how long the game plays. I feel the people who complain about how long it is don't really engage in the hobby aspect. They're the ones that will paint 3 colors on a model and call it done, because I guess that's battle ready. It feels like such a weird complaint to have, because most other war games don't really care about length, and if they do, they try to be a skirmish game. You can't be all things to all people. You can't be the ultimate war game. So caring less about having short games that are still a war game, but being competitively viable, but also being fun for casuals, and making it so that it's also super balanced, is like just spreading yourself too thin. I want every army to have a unique feel to them and have them be super fun. I think the dwarf army playing slow makes sense. I think Death Guard being an aggressive, high damage army makes very little sense. I want them to play slowly because that makes sense. I know it's a bit radical for me to suggest just grand sweeping army changes, but they're probably going to make an entire new rule set for 11th edition anyway. Yeah, I'm kind of doomering about that, but everything else I'm pretty cool about. I think if I could give you like a point breakdown of what I want from 11th edition, here's the 5 things that I want. Most of all, everything else is just gravy. Number 1. I want there to be more agency between turns for players who it isn't the turn of. The reaction system in Horus Heresy is good, but a bit limited due to the whole system itself being a bit weird. Number 2, I want there to be less fear with balancing everything and fine-tuning it to the point where everything gets kind of anchored to the center point of just being a 55% win rate, hopefully. Say a faction is too strong, you don't need to nerf the mechanic worldwide. You just need to nerf the individual aspect of that faction that exploits it. Shout out to the Kroot, who caught the mother of all strays for the exact reason I'm complaining about. Number 3. Add more differentiation to certain factions. Now, I'm not saying, hey, you need to give the Imperial Guard players D8s in order to play instead of D6s. What I'm saying is, if I hear a stat line or a strategy you did during a game, I should know, without you saying what your army is, what you're playing. You shouldn't be like, I am playing a gun line with a lot of low-strength shots. That could be quite a few different guys, because strength 4 is now considered low strength. Number 4, you should get rid of mortal wounds and find a new system to supplant it, because, man, I'm tired of just having people that have strategies that fish for devastating wounds or mortal wounds to just table an entire army. Like, a mortal wound to a guardsman should not be the same thing as a mortal wound to a custodes, so I feel like treating them as the same makes no sense. And number 5, this one I think is kind of the most controversial here, but I want to remind you guys of something. Now, don't lie, I think most of you are going to know what I'm talking about, but in old World of Warcraft, the old MMORPG that everyone loves to hate, and I just plain hate it, there was this numbers creep that happened a while back. From the first expansion to the second to the third to the fourth, and eventually, I think it was during Mists of Pandaria as an expansion that the levels of damage, the stacking abilities, and the number of bonus stats on weapons and armor and trinkets and so on could give you such insanely high amounts of damage output that the only way they could make the end of expansion raid boss worth a damn and able to actually be a challenge is if his health was literally billions and his damage could one-shot most people without the proper buffs. So, what did they do? Not to downplay the efforts of all the slave coders they incorporated in order to keep things going, but they basically took every number in the game on every piece of gear and at a minimum halved it, and then they also just took a bunch of stats off of other gear to keep it balanced. They halved, I think it's more than half, because I think at the time the level cap was at 135, and then they turned it back down to 60, and you know what? I fuck with it. I think doing that for 40k would be like pruning the dead heads off of flowers in a rose bush. There should be no reason as to why a melt-a-gun, which is an anti-tank weapon, isn't going to be wounding on 3s or better on a vehicle, and in current era 40k it wounds on 5s, unmodified, on a rhino. A fucking rhino. Yet for some reason, some dwarf with a big fucking hammer auto wounds on a 3 for any vehicles and monsters. They have gotten so high that unless you have an auto wound weapon, then some dudes are just going to be wounding on 6s or 5s if you're lucky. Now, am I vying for toughness 2 Space Marines? As funny as it would be, no. I just want weapons, toughness for big things, AP, and damage to be brought down a bit because, man, this shit just isn't fun. To the point where a friend of mine fielded a Gorkanaut, and I had no answer to it. Cool. Which is the correct response in Old Warhammer, as sometimes your weapons could just not deal with it, and some vehicles were just so big that you just had to bring anti-tank weapons for that eventuality. But the next game, I brought a 6-man unit of Thunderkin with gravity weapons and brought it down in one turn, which is also how that should not work. I'm just saying that the level of damage and the level of toughness should not be, if I have the response to you, you lose. It should be, if I have the response to you, then I have a chance at winning. It shouldn't be an all or nothing type of feeling. As much as I complain, I am an optimist, and I have high hopes for 11th edition. I spoke with a wargame creator, the founder of one of the more important ones out there, and I'm not going to say which wargame, because you're going to have to wait till the end of the month to find out about that. I shall not confirm it for now. But he told me something that kind of stuck with me, and the only war game that can survive a bad edition is Warhammer 40k, and I believe it. Though I don't know how many bad editions in a row it would take for a GW to actually see the impact, but I think it would take quite a few, so I think 11th edition, regardless of what it is, even though it might just build on 10th, is still going to be better, because I think a lot of people have been complaining. But change is good, and I welcome it with open arms. But what do you all think? More importantly, do you all want something different from me from 11th edition? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely want the discussion, because I'm going to be at Adepticon, and I'm going to be seeing what is likely going to be the live announcement of the new edition, especially because they're showing off all the orc models right now. Special thanks to my channel members. With your help, I am able to do so much. I am able to go to Adepticon, meet some of you, have a day off from time to time, then maybe sleep for a day when I get back before jumping back into work. Me, my staff, and everybody that kind of works with me want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And if you want to be a channel member and support this channel, you gain access to a bunch of perks. On the lowest tier, you gain access to all the videos the second they are available. And, you know, you also get to just know what's coming up and all that. But on the highest tier, you get access to 2 smaller videos a month, which will not be viewed for at least a year after the publishing date of the first video, because it's usually just going to be a series, and some of them I just don't put out. So yeah, thank you once again for watching. Until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful night.